Okay, the first question is for George. Has Robert Bigelow mentioned any paranormal activity in space involving Bigelow Aerospace that you can speak of?
No.
Okay, thank you.
He has one of his craft is attached to the ISS. It's been up there for, I think, 2 years. He has 2 other craft that have been floating around for much longer than that. One of them has one of my business cards floating in it because Bob, he initially was looking for ways to make money by having these craft up there. So he had the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 were launched atop rockets that he purchased in Russia, $20 million a pop, and sent the craft up there. The first one was lined with cameras inside and out, and the idea was to fly your stuff into space. So picture of your mom that would be inside the capsule would float around, and the cameras would capture it, download it. You could see your mom's picture floating in weightlessness of space. One of the things that's there is my business card, and I have yet to see it floating in space. But as far as I know, there has been no paranormal activity up there. There have been some strange things at Bigelow Aerospace plant that I think maybe had come back from the ranch. I'm not sure I can say what it is, but yeah, he said, yeah, no, sorry. I'm just trying to remember. I don't think so. I don't think I can. No. Just something kind of weird that happened in a very secure facility that they have there that was built to house really sensitive stuff. And it showed up on camera inside, and they can't figure out how it got in there. It shouldn't have been able to get in there because it's impregnable, but it was there nonetheless. Sorry, I can't give you more than that.
All right, thanks. All right, next question is for Salma and Lisil. As a member of a select few with personal direct encounters, do you consider the possibility that you were chosen to be an ambassador or interpreter of alien intent?
You want me to go first? I mean, absolutely. What exactly that entails, I think, is something that I personally am still unpacking and unraveling. What exactly does it mean to be an ambassador? I don't know. But I do think that there is a reason why we were the age that we were, why we were where we were, why we were selected, and why we're here.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe because of the ages as well, and to tell our story as young as we were, more people would be able to believe us.
Yeah. It didn't feel like that at the time, but yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
This is for everyone. Why don't we start with you, Randall? How do you expect the big reveal to take place? For example, how will aliens finally prove they exist? Perhaps landing at the White House, etc.?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I think it's going to be like we're seeing it, slow. It's been going slow for decades and decades, but it's been moving ahead. I mean, we've all been talking about the news that has happened this year and the more news that's going to be released. And that's a pretty accelerated change. My personal feeling is, I go off, I've had a lot of time to think about this. And I think about wondering if, somehow this is like a domestication program for us. Not to like domesticate us, but for us to realize that, okay, there is a human being attached to the leash that we're on, or you know what I mean? Sort of like how dogs are to people. That there is another higher intelligence out there. And they may understand that it's a shock for them to reveal themselves in a direct way. And encounters seem to prove that. But I think it's happening probably the way that it should happen, gradually, and I don't think they're going to show up until we're ready for it. you know, psychologically, mentally, and that's my personal perspective on it.
Okay, who else wants to answer that one? Peter?
I'll take that on. I'll give it a try, but I preface by saying that probably there are as many opinions and answers to that question as there are people in this auditorium tonight. And I suspect that many of the members of our audience are as qualified to answer that question as anybody up on this stage. But I often wonder whether they're leaving it to us humans, to figure out the solution to the problem, to detect them unambiguously and to show that they are here absolutely. It may simply be that they're leaving it to us to develop the technology to confirm that they are here.
Okay, anybody else? George?
I'm not sure we're ever going to know. You know, I think there's the progress that's been made in the last year is us knowing more about what our government knows. But I'm not convinced that anybody in our government really knows what's going on. I think there's a lot of people that have bits and pieces of it. You know, I've looked for, and other people have looked for the MJ-12s that made the secret treaties with the aliens and haven't found them. And you know, the ultimate truth seems to be tantalizingly just out of our reach. You know, we make what we think is progress, and then it's moved. The goalpost has moved, and you know, there's some people who have worked on this for a long time, very much below the surface. They're not names that you would know, who think that this intelligence is not alien, that it lives here, and that it manipulates us in ways that we don't really see all the time, both on the micro level, the kinds of things that we're talking about with the Skinwalker Ranch, where it has some bizarre episode that it displays itself, it allows us to see a glimpse of some other reality, and then it has no explanation, and we're off balance, and we're wondering what it means, and we're trying to make sense of it and put it in a box when it has no box. You know, it really doesn't have a meaning. A lot of times it's a distraction. It's a display. It's, as Bob Bigelow said, a performance, and it doesn't really have any kind of a pattern that means anything. And in the meantime, it manipulates us on the micro level, but also on the macro level in ways that we don't even see, and not for good purposes. Now, they're not here wherever they're from. They're not here blowing up our cities with laser beams and wiping us out, but they do, I think this intelligence does manipulate us for what ends we don't know, and sometimes it hurts people. I think the harm that it does to humans is generally incidental. It's sort of like you driving your car down a country road and you run over a lizard. You didn't go out trying to kill a lizard, but you're not going to cry a lot of tears because you ran over one. And I think there's a lot of that with what's going on. I'm not convinced that we're ever going to understand it. I suspect, or I hope I'm wrong, but I think that it's just a little bit out of our reach, and it keeps moving the goalpost down the road.
Okay, thanks. Jeremy, kind of a two-part question, starting with, in your time filming at Skinwalker Ranch, did you personally experience any paranormal phenomena?
First of all, I don't believe George because he put his card into space, so he's waiting for an alien phone call. So if there's breaking news, it's going to be from him. So I have not experienced anything extraordinary at Skinwalker Ranch. I'm overcritical when I'm there, I think, you know, because you're expecting to see something, you're hoping to see something. So maybe I'll see something that's interesting. I mean, one time we saw some lights where there shouldn't have been lights, but what is that? That's not someone coming up to you and looking at you and telling you something. However, I think it is interesting that, well, an example, last time we were there, we had a friend come with us who's going to be in the movie, and we're walking super late at night. It's like 2:30, and we're walking together, and he turns to me and he goes, you know, this is like we're looking for the proverbial paranormal needle in a haystack, because we're there for a weekend, The NIDS team was there for 7 years with 100 incidents, if that's correct. So you think about it, yeah, you got to go to look, to see. It's the seeker is the finder. You need to go and personally explore, get from behind the computer and go to try to, experience the world. But no, I haven't. But do I think that's significant? Absolutely not. The amount of time I spent on Skinwalker Ranch compared to George, compared to the NIDS scientists, it's minuscule. But I don't think you need to go to the ranch to experience it. It seems much more complex than that. However, I haven't talked about this, but last time we were there, I didn't experience something. But the story goes like this. Somebody who was there, who was part of a security detail, a sober-minded, understated individual who I recently met, but you can tell when people are, have fantasy in their mind or they don't. And at the end of the trip, I kind of look at him and I can tell it's time to go. We get off the ranch, we pull over, and he tells us a story of how when I was walking out from the outside back through this bedroom area of the command center for NIDS, which is that there was this smoky being, like very tangible, physical. He thought it was one of our friends who had left 2 hours before, so he was tall, and followed me through, and he said he thought it was his eyes until I walked through the kitchen. The kitchen was well lit, and it was a tangible, physical, trust me, I drilled him on this. This thing's following me, I want to know the details. So that's what he reportedly saw, and what's interesting is that this shadow person, he's not the first to have seen that kind of thing there. And he didn't know any of that. So, no, I haven't, personally.
It's called Sentient Mist, and it's been seen on the ranch for a long time, mostly by security personnel. There's a story, it hasn't been made public, but that, after the book came out and people started pestering the ranch managers and stuff and trespassing on the property and vandalizing it and having parties and stuff like that, they had security 24/7. And these guys would come in from Bigelow Aerospace. A lot of them are ex-cops, ex-military. They would spend 10 days at a time and then go back to Las Vegas. Some of them didn't want to go on the ranch. They would have one stay, that was enough. They wouldn't go back because a lot of them had experiences. One of the guys had an experience with this sentient mist. He's Skyping with his wife. He's saying goodnight to her at home, and she's asking, who else is there? Like, do you have a girlfriend or something? He says, nobody's there. Well, she had seen, as he's looking at his computer screen, this thing go behind him. And it's this sentient mist. It's a large, sort of grayish, dark brown cloud that has been seen going through the walls and through that facility. And that's what was behind Jeremy when he came out of one end of the building. The guy he's talking about is a security guy, ex-government guy, who has a celebrity client who, as soon as he saw this thing following Jeremy, he had seen it earlier in the evening come into the building, just go right through the wall, and his eyes are like this big. And he gathered up his client and gathered up the group and said, let's get the hell out of here, and didn't tell them what it was until they were off the property. So Jeremy underplayed that just a little bit.
And look, I've never seen Moscow, but I believe it exists, and that's the thing. Like I believe this guy. He saw what he saw, and yeah, they're known to be these hitchhikers, and I just personally didn't see it, probably gratefully, but
Okay, this is for you, Salma and Lisil. What was it like to return to school on the following Monday?
I remember everybody was, well, some kids were terrified, some kids were, excited, and we all discussed, we were all talking about what had happened on the Friday.
Yeah, it was very buzzy, Everybody was talking about what had happened on the Friday, what had happened on the weekend. Someone was like, oh, I bet you news people will come, and I was like, no, they won't. And they did. I think that was the day, correct me if I'm wrong, that the BBC came. Was that me? Sorry. That was the day the BBC came to interview us. They were the first ones on the scene. I think that was the Monday. So confusion, excitement, a little bit of fear, just sort of like, did this really happen? Didn't this happen? And where do we go from here?
Yes, just for the historical standpoint. Monday morning, the kids were asked to draw. They separated them into different classrooms. And it really came from the parents. It didn't come from the school. It was the parents, the kids that went home to their parents and told them what happened. And then the phone call back to the headmaster of the school, who started to take it seriously that morning and decided to have the children all draw pictures separated into different classrooms. And then at noon on that Monday was the first reporter that showed up from the BBC, which I'm really grateful for because he was the first one there. So yeah, Monday was a pretty hectic day for these guys.
Hey, thanks. Let's see here. How about for you, Randall? You knew and had worked with, now I'm forgetting his name.
Dr. Mack?
Yes, John
Yeah.
Mack. And what was it like to basically continue his work? What was that like for you?
That was difficult. Actually, John was a very brilliant man, Dr. John Mack. He was far ahead in his thinking and thinking very wide on the wide scope of what this means for humanity. And I've gotten to, through this film, I mean, I knew him personally, but also through this film and sort of following his tracks to Zimbabwe and looking into this whole phenomenon, you know, I kind of have understood him in a lot of ways that I never did when I was younger, and what he was talking about as far as the meaning for humanity and how important this was. I think that was something that really frustrated him at the time before he passed away, particularly because I had a conversation with him about 3 or 4 months before he passed, was his frustration that nothing was being done, like on a serious level of university, you know, like on a really serious level, like let's put all our assets as a human race into understanding what is happening. That was one of our last conversations. So he has made it. He made an influence on me for sure, and I think his contribution to the phenomena is not quite recognized yet. Really, the risk he took, some of his much more philosophical understandings and writings, I think in the future will become more relevant. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Peter, as director of the National UFO Reporting Center, I have a couple questions. How many sightings are reported to you daily, and what percentage do you think are credible?
It used to be the case until August of last year that I was getting, in rough round figures, between 10 and 25 reports a day. It's very, very difficult to say how many of them are legitimate reports of alien spacecraft. There are a lot of reports of overflights of the space station, all sorts of things that people report that they can't identify. There are many things that all of us cannot identify. Very few of them are of alien spaceships. Beginning August of last year, many of you have heard me talk about the prank calls that have been lodged to the National UFO Reporting Center hotline. On the 9th of September, that 10 to 25 jumped to about 330 calls, 95% of which were hoax calls. But it's very difficult until we can say, yes, that report was definitely a UFO, that report was definitely not a UFO. Until we can do that, and we cannot do that very effectively yet, we can't come up with a percentage. I'm sorry, I hesitate to commit myself to a figure. It's part of the reason that I'm so interested in the use of a type of radar known as passive radar, which will unambiguously tell us whether an object is something other than a meteor or an airliner or a flock of seagulls. But I can't come up with a figure as to what percentage are legitimate.
Can I just jump in on that question for a second?
Go ahead.
Well, it's just funny about reporting centers. I'm a private pilot. I've been for a long time, and you know, there's this thing in you know, one of your manuals is called the FAR AIM, which is all the regulations for the FAA. You know, what you're to do if you have a midair close call or whatever. Well, it just has surprised me because I've seen it for every year when I look at the manual, and it says if you have a close call, there's a section in the FAR AIM, the FAA's, you know, Bible essentially, on the rules, and if you run into a UFO, you are to, well, in any other case, if you run into another aircraft, I mean, you have to go through extensive reporting, and there's an investigation and all this other thing, or a near miss with another aircraft. But there's a section that says if you run into a UFO and an unidentified flying object, you're supposed to report it to your local police station. or a local or a UFO reporting center, and they have Bigelow Airspace as a recommendation. I don't know if how many of you guys know this, but it's kind of funny, you know, because if you run it doesn't matter what you run into in the air, it's pretty serious. You know, if you have a close call with something, whether it's unidentified or not. But the fact that they treat it differently raises my antennas a little bit and say, oh, that's odd. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, this is for anyone on the panel who wants to weigh in. It's a great question. What have you seen or heard about UFO sightings in Japan since Fukushima, the Fukushima nuclear meltdown?
I'll give it a try. I've had no reports from there that I'm aware of. I have no reason to believe that UFOs would be any more interested in that part of the world than any other part of the world. But you can answer that question by going to our website and just looking at all of the reports from Japan. It's fairly easy to do.
Okay. Jeremy and George, what are your thoughts on the similarity between some of the entities at Skinwalker Ranch and familiar beings, a demon attending or obeying a witch, often taking the form of an animal?
You're saying that's me. You know, we don't know what any of them are. So, yeah, you know, it's like I am personally ready to dismiss this idea the Pentagon cancels the UFO study that involved the ranch because some bureaucrats in the Secretary of Defense office or generals at the Pentagon think it's demonic, and that by studying it, you invite demons to come through the dimensional barrier and create a reign of evil over humankind. Seems kind of silly, or not. I mean, we don't know. They could be demons. You You know, they could be aliens. We don't know what they are. So you can't cross it off the list. There are similarities with the kinds of folklore tales about witches and their familiars that change shapes. Those stories are throughout every culture in the world, throughout human history. The idea of shapeshifters, werewolves, those kinds of things. So I don't cross it off. I mean, there's no evidence for it that would satisfy science, I guess, or the government. But yeah, it sounds pretty close.
Yeah. I don't sure.
Okay.
The more familiar I think that you get with the details of the reports of UFO encounters and the phenomenon in general, the less familiar you feel with it. And that's what happened to me. Very nuts and bolts, heard Bob Lazar's story, makes sense, got it, spaceships, other beings, other planets, I'm there. Wait a second, back the fuck up. I'm not there. And I'm not there because the evidence doesn't point to that. And as Dr. Colin Kelleher says in our film, it's like a fly in the ointment, that it's not easily explained as extraterrestrial. So, you know, thanks for that. You know, completely confused now, but that's okay. That's the truth.
All right, this goes out to anyone up there who wants to take a shot at it. Have you ever seen a human on Earth that you believe is an alien, and if so, who? And are they sitting on the panel?
I'd cite the last presidential election and subsequent events, and I'd rest my case. I'm not taking sides, by the way, with that.
All right.
There was a remote viewer named Ingo Swann, who, like the father of remote viewing, who had some amazing reports when he first started developing his gift. And he worked with Hal Puthoff and others and Russell Targ at the Stanford Research Institute, research that was funded by the CIA, that developed the protocols that became remote viewing. And these early remote viewers, in particular Ingo Swann, had some amazing encounters as they projected their consciousness. And I don't know what you think about remote viewing, but the CIA and the US Army believed that it was real and it was useful, at least for 20 years of the study. These remote viewers, as they honed their skills and projected their consciousness, kept running into UFOs and aliens. And Ingo Swann, in one of his books, has stories about encountering human-looking aliens in the grocery store. And he could sense that they were something other than normal, that they were staring at him. He got into some kind of stare down with these aliens who were picking out vegetables or something like that. And you know, what value do you put on that? I don't know, but it's not all that uncommon to hear those kind of reports.
Okay, thank you. This is for Randall, Salma, and Lisil. The question goes, I know Salma and Lisil are helping humankind in their professions. Are the other kids doing the same?
Definitely there are some of them, for sure. I know Luke was in Vietnam working with, I believe it was the homeless crowd there. He was doing a lot of really great work. But yeah, I mean, I think from what I know, a lot of the children that witnessed this event are. And at the same time, they're all trying to find their way, you know, after seeing something like that. That's my take. That's what I've learned.
According to Facebook, everybody is doing something worthwhile. So.
Well, that's got to be true then. Okay, this is for anyone who wants to respond. Interesting. Will Stephen Hawking's recent death have an impact on the ufology community? If so, how?
Well, I'm really glad he brought up aliens finally toward the end of his life. I don't know if he was correct about it, but I'm glad he addressed it and the importance of it.
Moving on. Oh, Peter, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Stephen Hawking's warned us about the possible outcome of some kind of interaction between human beings on this planet and alien creatures. I think that's not an unreasonable warning, and I think we have to act on the side of caution. We have to act on the side of, in the interests of our own welfare. In that respect, his departing this planet, Stephen's death, I hope it doesn't diminish that warning, because it is not an unreasonable observation on his part.
Thank you. All right, this is a question addressed to George.
I have a quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. From your two experiences, I'm sure they're different and similar, but did you feel that there was a malevolence or benevolence? Did you feel that this was for the good of human beings and your personal self, or did you feel it was not good? You know, because that's kind of what those questions are about, right? Just curious.
Well, we spoke about that yesterday.
I know. A little more detail, please. That was...
I mean, I think it's a multitude of things. I don't know if it's any one thing. I think I'm still trying to really decipher what it means, and I feel something different each time, like every year or every time I think about it, or I really take the time to engross myself in it. Definitely not malevolence, I don't think. And I don't know, Lisil, you know, initially I would have said it was sort of just like more curiosity, sort of just like indifference initially, but I think as I'm getting older, that's really starting to change, because I think I'm starting to really unravel a little bit more and more about what the incident itself entailed and meant for me. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, very
Okay.
much so, yeah. Just curious.
Yeah, I don't think there were, I mean, there was trauma by some of the kids. But it didn't, you know, it didn't appear invasive, at least on a physical way, but psychically, or however you say, however these things communicate or address, that definitely happened and disturbed a lot of people. But I never got the sense from everything I've looked into that it was malevolent, you know, was to cause harm, or it really does appear like a very curiousness, much of a curiousness on their part, and maybe in imparting some information to them.
Okay, thanks. This question is addressed to George and Peter. In your opinion, is space exploration going to be solely pursued by the private sector, or will NASA regain prominence and lead these efforts?
I think the best thing NASA can do is get out of the way. You know, NASA's really, NASA's a jobs program. It spends all that money. It's not that much money, but it's a pretty good chunk of dough, and they spend it on figuring out ways to keep everyone busy and employed. And so they'll start some rocket program, or there's some new spacecraft. Ah, darn, that one doesn't work. Let's start another one. And here we are. We've got $100 billion invested in the ISS, and we don't have a way to get there. We got to get a ride. We got to catch a cab or an Uber from Russia or other places. We don't even have our own system for getting to the space station that we put all that money into. So the best thing NASA could do is get out of the way. Bigelow's an example. I don't want to keep invoking his name, but you know, he spent $350 million of his own money in to build these spacecraft. Elon Musk has used his own money to create SpaceX and has made incredible strides. The other entrepreneurs, Branson and folks like that, are making real progress and would make more progress if NASA would get out of the way. But they just can't quite let go. But that is the future of space exploration, is to commercialize it. You know, you can do things in zero gravity that you can't do down here. Make fabricate metals and make medicines and do the kind of research that you can't do in gravity. And so there are great potential applications. There are countries in the world that can't afford to invest enough money to create their own space program from scratch, but they have their own astronaut corps. They want to go. They're waiting for a chance to get on the ISS, and it's a really long waiting list. So if commercial opportunities could be created, if you had private space stations where you could shoot movies, where you could have labs that, you know, you dice it up and somebody comes in for 6 months and performs experiments and creates materials and things like that, it would be successful. People would pay that. Nations would pay for it. Australia, for example, and Japan and other countries that have the resources to send astronauts up, but maybe not the resources to invest in a whole space program from scratch. The possibilities are endless. The kinds of structures that are being built that could serve as a space station in low Earth orbit, the same kind of things could be the basis of a permanent facility around the moon, on the moon surface, in Mars. It's an exciting time. We're really close on that. And, you know, it's our destiny to be out there and to be explorers and to look around the cosmos. And I wish that I would had another 100 years to live, because I'd love to see it, you know.
Space exploration isn't my field of expertise, but I will express an opinion. My suspicion is that both space exploration in the U.S. will be pursued by both public and private companies, or public and private sectors. I say that because there are certain elements of our space exploration that have military applications, and I suspect the government would want to keep a tight rein on some of those and not farm them out to public companies.
Thank you. All right, Jeremy, here's a question for you. Are you aware of the many similarities between the Skinwalker Ranch phenomenon and the Bell Witch phenomenon in Tennessee?
Absolutely zero.
There are none, or you don't know about them?
I just simply don't know about what you're talking about. I'm sorry. Do you guys know? No. I'm sorry. I will educate myself. Send me an email that's very lengthy. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, on to the next one. Peter, have there been any recent sightings reported in the Pacific Northwest we should know about?
I'm sure there are many, many sightings that have occurred. Just to put sort of error bars on how effective a reporting center is, my estimate is that out of somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 sightings of UFOs by adult, competent, clear-thinking, capable people, reliable people, we get only one of them between MUFON and me and UFOs Northwest. So we're getting UFO reports all the time, many of them from the Pacific Northwest. But if I receive a report, it goes to the website. Many people call me up and ask me if I could go into my secret archive and look to see if there are any reports from their particular hometown. Everything you see on the UFO Center website is everything I receive. I do not filter except to filter out obvious cases of mistaken identity or hoaxes or things that are really not of any great interest. But all you have to do is go to the website, ufocenter.com, look at the appropriate state or time period, and you'll see everything I have.
There is a sighting that's expected tonight in Portland. I saw it on the news. We were waiting to come over here. Stormy Daniels is performing at a strip club.
Everyone be careful. Okay, moving along. We spoke about Stephen Hawking just a moment ago, and another person is interested in the impact of Art Bell and his career and now his passing.
Well, it's the end of an era. You know, I think I've known Art for close to 30 years. He was on KDON, their station in Las Vegas, doing late night talk and doing politics and all the regular stuff that late night hosts do before Coast to Coast. And when he had this idea to focus on weird stuff and weird people and weird stories, and it worked. And I was around when he launched what became Coast to Coast. It was Area 2000, I think, and then Dreamland, and eventually morphed into Coast to Coast, carried on. I think he had something like 12 million listeners at his peak. We have more stations now that cover the program, that carry it, 650 stations, but he had more listeners back then. There was less competition, you know. There were no podcasts that covered the same kind of turf. And, but really what made it go was Art was such a unique talent and was a great listener more than anything, a great voice and had a great style in terms of interviewing people, but more than anything, he was a great listener, and he figured out ways to milk it. You know, had some crazy caller with some wild story, and he could turn it into 2 hours of radio gold, you know, whether it was complete bullshit or not. Since his passing, you know, there's been a lot of turmoil among his followers. There were people who hoped that he would return to Coast and take it back over. And, you know, he left. There were reasons that he left. And there were some tension that continued through the rest of his life. And then, you know, he launched the satellite version of his show and didn't work. And then Midnight in the Desert. And there's been some disagreements about how it should proceed. But what an amazing legacy that he was able to tell us that it is not only entertaining, but educational to pursue these topics, that you can do it in a credible way, and that there's an audience for it, and an insatiable hunger. He touched the pulse of the public and figured out that people want to know about these things. They want to honestly pursue them. They don't want to be ridiculed, unless they got it coming. And one other note about Art, you know, we all miss him. We still don't know what the cause of death is. And I call the Clark County Coroner's Office. You know, Nye County doesn't really have a coroner's office. They send it to Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is. And it's nothing mysterious. It's that toxicology tests take a long time. It can be 2-3 months before those results come back. It's been a week since I've called, but I've pestered them enough now that if they got the results, I think they would call me, but we don't have the results yet. But, you know, he was a smoker for a long time. He had some health issues, and so far there's no hint of foul play, if anybody's wondering that.
Okay, thanks. This is for Randall and Salma and Lisil. Can you talk about the kind of the spectrum or the one extreme to another of the trauma that some of the kids had to deal with following the incident? And is there a possibility that there were abductees as part of that incident?
From what I understand and the witnesses I've spoken to and the teachers and everybody else, yeah, there was a level of trauma to some of the children for sure, that never left them till this day. I think I mentioned last night that there were 3 that were brought to a paramedic he was a counselor also, to help these one boy and 2 girls to try to calm down, you know, to basically to calm down, to try to give them some peace of mind. I think the spectrum is pretty wide, because some of the kids, depending on, I think it was, I'm maybe guessing a little bit here, but it seems like the younger kids weren't as traumatized. I could be wrong about that, but I kind of felt like if they were over the age of 10 or so, their interpretation of it was different, because they were sort of in a, you know, they're not in those ages where everything's possible. So, I mean, it affected, and to be honest with you, it affected every single person totally differently. And a large part of that was their family, if they were allowed to talk about it. And their friends. I think that really, it's important. I know that because I've talked to other people outside of aerial school and those who've had no one to talk to about their encounters and how difficult that is. And then others who've had family and other people that they could share with their experiences with who believe them. Makes a big difference in the person's health in the long run. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can only speak to my own trauma. And as Randall said, having the ability to speak to family members who, A, allowed that and also listened, be listened and listened without any judgment was very helpful. But that also, in my case, certainly did not stop me from internalizing the experience either. And so my spectrum of trauma went from talking about it extensively and incessantly, very, very exhausting, to just not wanting to talk about it at all. Like I was just done, and I didn't until Randall popped up into our lives again, like I said yesterday in 2010 when he interviewed us. So that sort of hibernation of internalized, internalizing the experience, it was difficult. It was difficult because while it was internalized, it's still in the back of your mind. That's normally when I would have dreams, and so on and so forth. So now I'm on the other end of the spectrum where it's very healing to be able to be in a space like this and have these conversations and to be able to have spoken to Randall, I think was really the beginning of the healing process personally for me, in recognition of my truth and what had happened. Lisil?
I think with me, after the incident, obviously I'd spoken to my parents about it, which they believed me. After the nightmare I had, we didn't really discuss it again until Randall popped up into our lives. And then, that's when I really started, expressing and talking to him about what happened. But then again, we don't really discuss it with a lot of people, yeah. So, like for this, me coming up to America to tell everyone what's happened, it's been quite difficult. And I've also been very, very nervous at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you've taken that risk, and both of you guys to come out here and be on stage for the first time and share something that is really personal. I think, from my take of seeing that, it's something that, was not something you just talk about. Yeah, and I appreciate that.
Randall, follow-up question. Do you have the feeling that certain children were, I don't know if targeted is the right word, but that the beings were more interested in some children as opposed to others on the playground that day?
I don't feel that way. I haven't seen that. Yeah, I don't have any evidence or anything from interviews that was the case. How it affected different children or whether they received a message or not, I mean, that may have everything to do with the child, their openness or where they were at in their lives as human beings, how the encounter affected them. But yeah, I didn't see any particular targeting. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. For George and Jeremy, two related questions. Has anyone taken holy water or a priest out to Skinwalker Ranch? And following that, have you or the NIDS team been to similar sites such as Skinwalker Ranch? And if so, are there many?
I don't know about the holy water thing, not to my knowledge. I know that, I might have mentioned it earlier today, is that there was that debate on the NID Science Advisory Board about how to approach the study, whether or not, and then there was second guessing too, whether or not to go in full bore, full hardcore science tech approach, or try to do it a passive shaman, psychics, that kind of thing. The hard tech won out, and it had its challenges. It was never able to sort of pierce the veil and figure out the mystery. Not sure that the other approach would have worked or not. Towards the end of NIDS, when it existed, they reevaluated it and thought, well, maybe we should have done this, but I don't know about any priest going there. I do know that in the beginning, there was black magic, like sort of animal sacrifices, evidence of that on the property. It's suspected that maybe some of the Utes, some of the holy men from the tribe had been on the property, sort of trying to calm things down there and try that approach. The second half of the question was about, other spots.
Yes.
Yeah, that was part of the reason they let me write about it after 7 years of seeing the material that was coming in, is because they wanted to see if the public could come forward with leads on other hot spots, and yeah, they found them. NIDS spent a great deal of time at Dulce, the Jicarilla Apache tribe that's in the area of Dulce. We've all heard the stories about the secret underground base and giant vats where they cook up alien-human hybrids and things. They never found that base. But the tribe, once the NIDS folks got their confidence, shared many of the same kind of stories. UFO-type activity, lights in the sky, and things that came in and out of the mountains there. Bigfoot, for sure. A lot of mutilation cases, and sort of spirit kind of, I don't remember the term skinwalker ever popping up there, but a lot of the same kind of activity. Sedona is another area where they found a lot of evidence of a similar mix of activity, not quite as intense as Skinwalker, as the Uinta Basin, and then the Yakima Reservation in Washington. And it's all, of course, the Native American connection pops out at you. I guess everywhere has a Native American connection if you go back far enough. And the Dulce thing is the one they spent the most time on. I think they were there on the ground 6 months. They also, you will see things online occasionally, people sort of claiming that they've sort of been verified as legit because NIDS at some point contacted them. NIDS contacted a lot of people, and they wrote most of it off. You know, they would hear stories about there's some other ranch. I'm not even going to. There's another ranch where the guys claimed to have killed 19 aliens, and he sold the ranch for $6 million or something like that. And,
That was like
okay.
rumors that maybe he started.
Yeah, I don't know, but I do know that the NIDS guys did go there, did check out the story, and they thought it was bullshit. So take that for what you want. I don't know. I don't know the guy. I know he did finally sell his property, but they didn't think there was anything to it. There was another Ted Phillips. You know that name, Ted Phillips, and he's like the world's expert. Had the biggest database on what we'd call UFO trace cases, landing site trace cases, where witnesses see a UFO land, and then the investigators go out and you find physical evidence that something had actually been there. Flattened grass, burned soil, baked soil, broken tree branches where a craft settled down or went through bushes or something like that. Ted Phillips had come up with his own hotspot called Marley Woods. And a lot of similar kinds of activity, strange stuff, inexplicable, UFOs, aliens, beings, crop circles, Bigfoot, all that stuff in this Marley Woods area, which he's never really identified where it is. And I know I put the NIDS folks in touch with him. They went and spent some time, but I think in a typical fashion, for my friend Mr. Bigelow, they wanted to sort of take over. And Ted Phillips was, hold on, slow down here, and sort of backed off, so it didn't work out. But yeah, there are other places. And as I said earlier today, I'm sorry to hog all this time, but you know, it's like throwing a dart in a dartboard. If you put enough time and resources into studying any spot, could you come up with lore, stories, mythology, supernatural, spooky stuff? Yeah, probably so. One last example, Hessdalen in Norway. Hessdalen is a site of one of the longest UFO projects. A UFO in a sense that it's lights. It's mysterious lights that have been seen by the Norwegians for decades, maybe centuries. And they've set up a monitoring system in the Hessdalen Valley to sort of measure it, to record it. But they're only interested in lights. And the scientists who are involved in that project get queasy when the weird stuff is attached, when they go out and interview people about the lights and, hey, by the way, I got poltergeist in my house. They don't want to hear that stuff. I'm just sticking here to the lights. That's all I want to talk about. So I suspect if you were to spend some time on the ground with a team like NIDS in Hessdalen, you'd collect the kind of stories that Jeremy and I have heard at Skinwalker Ranch.
I actually want to attack the holy water question real quickly, because it is very interesting. I don't want to belittle it. That was, for me, a very strange experience. Maybe it's what you bring to it. Like, I couldn't imagine nicer people for aliens to meet than you guys, right? So it's like maybe that experience was positive because of who you are. But there is a fear associated with the phenomenon in the Uinta Basin. People don't talk about it. So just to be straightforward and honest, yeah, I mean, we had a holy, like a shaman on deck one trip because our liaison said, no, it's serious. If you get a hitchhiker, we have ways to deal with this culturally that you don't. And so we are going to provide that for you if you need it. It's so funny because in the middle of the night, he's scared as shit. I'm looking at him. I can tell he's scared as shit. And I'm like, should I be scared? Should I be scared? I felt fine. And I look at him, I go, you okay? And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? He said, I want to go back. I said, okay. So he went back. At the end of the night, sun's coming up. He starts calming down. I'm like, are we good? He's like, we're good. We don't need that holy man, right? So nothing happened. We didn't need the holy person. The point is that culturally, maybe we don't have the ability to understand or determine how to deal with these experiences, maybe even just psychologically, but other cultures might. And the most disturbing thing that happened to me when, besides having to bunk up with our friend named Matt, the most disturbing thing that happened to me was I met a police officer. The police officer took me aside, we were doing filming, took me into his little command bunker, showed me a video. Video was of a UFO hovering over the Uinta Basin. I said, can I have it? And he's like, nope. I'm like, can I have it one day? He's like, maybe. It was pretty cool UFO video. But he said to me, look, you're here actively hunting it. We don't hunt it. We're on patrol. We slam into it like a car crash unexpectedly. We're not asking for it. I've seen people like you get harmed. And I want to warn you that you might think this is, fantasy or something like that. It's not. It's watching, it knows what you're doing, and it's intelligent, and it will hurt you if it's given the chance. That scared the crap out of me, And then he gave us the holy man, so I was doubly scared. The point is, I'm not even closer to the truth, but I don't want to belittle that question of the holy water because there is faith and there is belief that are associated with culturally that I think is supportive of this experience or not supportive. And I think we should have a supportive culture around this experience because obviously it's happening and it's real. So that's it. And if I was an alien, I'd like to meet you women.
Okay, this one is for anyone who wants to respond to it. It's a good question. What evidence or experience first made you believe, to whatever extent you do, in the possibility that extraterrestrial phenomenon were real?
I'll give that a try. I can ascribe my answer to a sighting I had as a young lad. I believe it was July of 1954. You can read my sighting report on our website for July of 54 in the city of St. Louis, Missouri. I had experienced a very dramatic sighting of a very peculiar object over a drive-in theater and over the St. Louis airport that night. It was only about 5 or 10 seconds long. But my whole family saw it. My mother, my older brother, who's now a physician. My father was in the Air Traffic Control Center tower at St. Louis Airport, which at that time was on the north side of the airport, not the south. And I think I can honestly report to this audience that the reason I'm sitting here behind this table next to George Knapp and the other speakers is because of that sighting. it implanted in me apparently a lifelong interest in the UFO phenomenon and trying to get to the bottom of it.
For me, it was government documents. I remember it was the mid-1980s, and you hear these occasional stories about this mysterious place called Area 51, but no one had really looked into it. And then I meet a guy named John Lear, who walked into the TV station one day with a stack of government documents for my boss, a guy named Ned Day, my boss and mentor and running buddy, and he plops them on Ned's desk and said, look, you got to read this. This is the biggest story in history, and it's a UFO cover-up, and it's real, and here's the evidence. And Ned was having no part of it. He said, look, if it was real, I'd already know about it, so therefore it can't be real. And I was eavesdropping as always, and I said, let me see that stuff. And I started reading it. I thought, can this be real? These documents are real from the FBI and CIA and Air Force and other military outfits. And so I had John Lear come on a little public affairs TV show that I hosted at the time that would air at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. Nobody watches it. I'd have a city councilman or something like that. And suddenly my phone is ringing off the hook with people who want to know about who's that UFO guy. And so I started reading more, and government documents in particular were what caught my attention, because what the government would say to us publicly is there's nothing to it, we don't care, it's not a threat to national security, which is quite different from what they would say in private to themselves. When the Freedom of Information Act became the law of the land, all these agencies that had said they had no UFO files, had no UFO studies, no interest in the topic, were forced to release thousands of pages of documents that showed that they were lying. That interested me. And as a journalist, you know, I can't go out in the desert and chase flying saucers, although I have tried a lot of times, but you don't know when they're going to show up. But the paper trail, the documents, is something you can sink your teeth into. You can follow those. You can follow the evidence, find the people who made the reports and interview them and pursue it that way. And that's what got me hooked, because the documents make it's unambiguous that these military agencies took this very seriously and that they considered these things to be real and of unknown origin. So that's what got me.
Bob Lazar got me interested in this, hearing his story.
I mean, obviously, my experience got me interested in it, but you already know about that, so.
Well, same thing here. Seeing, actually witnessing also got me interested in it.
Can you repeat that question?
Let's see.
Is it what got into, okay.
What evidence or experience first made you believe, to whatever extent you do, in the possibility that extraterrestrial phenomenon were
Okay,
real?
got it. So yeah, the first time I ever heard about this was from my uncle. He had seen something when he was 16 years old on the top of a hilltop, and he had seen this cigar-shaped thing in the valley where we live, and these little balls or silver things coming in and out of it. He said it was massive. And he never stopped talking about that till the day he died. And he was my favorite uncle. And that was the first time I had ever even heard of UFOs or anything like that. And then me and my dad and my uncle were in the kitchen on Christmas at my grandmother's house. She's 96. And we all saw this orange ball of light go low altitude through the valley. And we just all looked around at each other, and I was a little kid at the time. But those things come to mind. And then I did have something happen to myself at one point. I would love to talk about that, but not till probably a few years from now. But yeah, that definitely made me say, what's going on here? You know, it wasn't like a UFO, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't watching tons of sci-fi or into UFOs or anything, but things that were happening around my family and other reports really sparked my curiosity. And a strong drive to discover what's going on, try to figure out what's going on, and to not keep it a secret, you know, because even in our own family, you know, my uncle's story was sort of kept secret. We all knew it, but, you know, it's just be helpful if everybody came forward and told these stories. And so that's my story.
All right, thanks. This is for Jeremy. Did the making of Patient 17 solidify an opinion for you either way on alien implants?
That's a really tough question. No. I could stop there, I think, but no. I mean, I was very uninformed about the idea of that before I ever started the movie. I actually told Dr. Lear, who was kind of going through a friend of mine to talk to me about it, that I was going to expose him as a fraud if he was lying to people. You know, and I said, "Are you sure you want me to make the documentary?" And he says, "Yeah, I do want you to make the documentary, or film it." And then I thought, wow, it's kind of cool. You get to see someone cut open and something taken out. Wild, okay. But I still, throughout the whole way, I mean, I wasn't mocking it. It was outside of the scope of my understanding, or even, I had no idea. But what really informed me in this film is that people take this very seriously and has very serious impact. I believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Patient 17 has had contact with non-human intelligences. You know, he's had abductive experiences. I am sure this guy is a straight shooter. Do I think that this object in his leg that he was convinced to be cut out has anything to do with being created by a non-terrestrial intelligent society? I have no idea. I have no idea. And the lab results show that this is non-terrestrial zinc. One lab result, we should do 2 more. But it just seems so rudimentary. So I don't know. That's a big no. So that's a long way around the no I said at the beginning, you know? However, I think that it's a valid pursuit, and I also think that we got intriguing results, and I think that the idea of zero gravity in your business card, but also having laboratories in zero gravity is really important, because I know that microgravity has a huge effect on the way that you can stack matter, and I know the future of material science is in metamaterials, and I know that we have metamaterials. I just got an email yesterday from a friend of mine from childhood whose dad worked with Werner von Braun, and all the people that he worked with knew about these non-terrestrial materials that they were studying all the way back then. This is something that's been going on behind the scenes. It's time to get it forward and move it out so science can utilize this. We have created metamaterials now that have never existed before on Earth, and they have incredible properties that were even thought of before. So the long way around the story is that, no, I don't know about alien implants. However, I think the pursuit of the science behind what we suppose in this is really, really important, because it will create a new material science, which was the major roadblock that Lazar talked about. They couldn't remake anything, really, because of the elements and because of the material science. I don't know if that answered your question, but it sure answered mine.
Thank you, Jeremy. This is a question for whoever wants to respond, but let's start with George. Earlier today in your presentation, you talked about the portal at Skinwalker Ranch, and one of our folks here tonight wants to know, what do you know about the reported hotspot for UFOs and a portal perhaps around Mount Adams, Washington?
I don't know much about it other than general reports that there's a lot of activity there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't have any specifics.
Does anyone else want to take that question? Peter?
I'll give a shot at it. I've written an article on the issue, the subject of hotspots for the MUFON UFO Journal, monthly publication, of course. And I point out that there really are no hotspots, with one exception based on the data I have. Other people may have different data, but the only hotspot I can see in our data is for Horry County, South Carolina, I would invite anybody who's interested in this topic just to go to the data for South Carolina and look at that county. About 6 years ago, it was May of 2012, these sightings of clusters of red, orange, yellow, amber, and gold fireballs, or call them what you wish, orbs, began in earnest. And it is unsettling to me just how many of those reports have come from Myrtle Beach, North Myrtle Beach, Pawleys Island, and surrounding areas. One codicil I would like to add to that is when I talk to somebody on the telephone, they'll tell me their report, and they'll more often than not, they'll say, by the way, did you know that my town was a hot spot for UFO sightings? And I say, no, why do you believe that? Well, back in 24 years ago, another gentleman had another sighting. The fact of the matter is UFOs are being seen, based on my data again, in almost every community in this country. And I take exception to the proposal that they're hotspots, except where specific, reliable data can support the notion that they exist.
Sorry, quick question again. Peter, when you have a mass sighting reported to your data center, do you notice that there are sightings prior and after that mass sighting, or no?
I haven't looked at that question, so it's a good question, Jeremy, but I haven't looked at the data with regard to that issue. Oftentimes, though, well, let me say one of the things you have to do when you're processing data, the likes of which I have, is distinguish between many, many sightings of the same object and the reverse, when you can have many witnesses to the same case, and that's nevertheless is only one case. Oftentimes you have one sighting to many objects, so you have to distinguish between those two types of cases, and I have not done that. I don't have time to. I'm working 2 shifts a day, 7 days a week to just collect the data. I don't have the luxury of being able to analyze it sufficiently.
I would add this regarding hotspots. I think a lot of it depends on who reports what, because I know in the Uinta Basin, the population became so used to seeing these things, they didn't report them anywhere. I know that this statistic is 90 to 95% of all UFOs can be explained prosaically. It's also true that 9 out of 10 are not reported at all. Not to Peter, not to the police, not to Bigelow or the FAA or anybody. You don't call them in. People are afraid of being ridiculed. And in the Uinta Basin, who are you going to call? The local cops? Generally, you call Junior Hicks. So, you know, it depends on what the database is. It's great to have the National UFO Reporting Center, and I wish more people would avail themselves of it, but you can only make conclusions on the data you have, and if people don't call and there's no record of it, then it might as well not exist.
Okay, thanks. This is for Salma and Lisil. After your experience, did you find your senses were heightened more throughout your life?
I think with me, I try to carry on as normal as possible. I know I became a bit rebellious in high school, but yeah, I just tried as much as possible just to carry on and try and block it out, really.
Gosh, it's a great question, but I think it's difficult for me to answer because you can't really compare an 11-year-old to a 35-year-old, which is the age we're at now. Well, I'm going to be 35. I will say that post the event, I mean, it wasn't like I felt that I had any other special things about me. In fact, I felt very unspecial for a very long time. I felt it was almost burdensome, actually. But I think that I I can now recognize that that is simply because I didn't feel that I had an outlet from which to recognize what the incident meant and what the event meant to me. So, having said that, I would say that my sense of awareness, which I hope we all attain at some point in our lives, my sense of self-awareness has really become heightened, whether or not it has to do with this incident or not.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to lighten things up here a little bit. So this is for anyone. Who do you think the men in black are?
I personally think they are military people with that are great engineers, and they use the engineering to provoke the fears in humanity. That is my personal opinion.
All right. I think that's correct, that some of them are military guys who operate under the guise of the MIB legend just to cause mischief and to intimidate witnesses and things of that sort. But some of them are something else. And I don't know if they're aliens or spirits or demons or what they are, but I mean, some of those early reports, the Gray Barker era, don't sound like military people. It sounds like a time traveler or something, somebody who's out of sorts and out of whack and just not quite right. I think the same kind of thing has happened with Men in Black reports that happens with cattle mutilations is, you know, there's these weird incidents where cattle and other animals are carved up, and it gives the government or corporations the flexibility to operate under the umbrella of the paranormal, meaning no one's going to take this seriously because everybody thinks it's aliens and there's not going to be an investigation, so they go out and carve up cattle for their own reasons. For example, tracking the spread of pathogens, prions, mad cow, things like that through the food chain. I think there's some evidence of that. So, you know, in general, yeah, I think a lot of these things could be military. Same as like on the ranch. A lot of the things that happen there could be military. Are they? A lot of them, probably not.
A lot of people accuse George of being a man in black, so take what he says with a grain of salt. I always diminish this experience, but I did have a very strange experience. Of course, it was already strange because I was with John Lear at Area 51, so it doesn't get weirder than that. But my experience I can't quantify for you. However, I do find it really interesting when you ask people about their UFO experiences, sometimes you get the details if they're willing to talk with you. I have a friend, he's like probably 80 years old now. He was living in Long Beach. I mean, it was the 40s. Right, before 47, before Roswell, and he had never told anybody this story, ever, and I believe him. He's a very closed person, and he told me about swimming in a pool, and all of a sudden he's underwater, and it's like he could have been underwater forever. He's like, it was strange. I could have held my breath forever, and everything was silent. And he comes up, there's no splashing of the 100 kids in the public pool, and he comes up, and he sees this huge mothership just right over him. And he says it's like sweating, breathing. He can't describe it to me. Right after that, some military planes come in. The thing just lurched, he said. He's an artist. He's got great words. He was an art teacher in South Central back in the day, and he just has this way with words, but he said it lurched, and then it just kind of slowly moved off, and these planes, our best fighter planes at the time, not really great to today's standards, came in. But the weirdest thing was, as a kid, he remembers, and he was about 8 years old. Before they could leave the pool, he and his 3 friends, kind of stand by me kind of stuff, there was a card table set up, and 2 guys, black suits, black ties, white shirts, took everybody's names, all their addresses, information. I mean, kids took that information before they could leave the pool. How did they get there so quickly? Who are these people? My friend is not a liar. He doesn't want me to repeat who he is, and he told me that story. So there is truth to that stuff. Who is it? How did they know? No government agency is going to know all of a sudden that happened to the kids, so it's a mystery to me. But I just wanted to share that story because I found it interesting.
Okay. That wasn't as light as I thought it would be. Okay, Randall, a question for you. Did Did many of the aerial school students move away or live around, or do they live around the world now? Could this be so that they spread their experience around the globe?
Huh. I've actually had that thought. Interesting. Good question. Yes, most of them do not live in Zimbabwe anymore, and they are scattered all around the globe. United States, Canada, Germany, I mean, just everywhere. Australia, New Zealand. As far as I'm aware, there's about 20 or 30 still in Zimbabwe. But yeah, they are all over the globe. Well, that thought did cross my mind of, wow, this is interesting. You know, it's not like it was a very isolated event in a very isolated place. And the fact that these kids went all over the globe definitely crossed my mind. Like, interesting, you know, a way of having an encounter somewhere and spreading that information to the globe.
Okay.
That was, I mean, if I'd just like to add, that's so funny because I never thought about it that way. I don't know if you ever did, you know. We didn't leave our country because we wanted to, by the way. That was not why we left. It's not why anybody left. Political turmoil had us all over the place and separated from our families. So having this sort of be like a subsequent result is kind of interesting. I've never thought about it that way. So thanks for whoever asked that question. It's kind of a nice way to look at being removed from your homeland. So.
Okay, thanks. This is for everyone. Why don't we start with Peter? It is my belief that we don't have disclosure because of economic reasons or impacts. Do you agree or disagree?
Well, I disagree. I think disclosure is going to be the function not of economic stature in our society, but rather based on good, clear, reliable data. The government may come clean. It may decide to reveal the truth about the UFO phenomenon. The events beginning in October and December of last year are a first good step in that direction. But I don't think it has anything to do with economic stature of the government or our society or economy or individuals. Again, I'd go back to my proposal to use passive radar. It will solve this question. It will resolve the need for having UFO festivals and conferences because we will, if we have passive radar units in place, we will be able to show that these objects that people are reporting to us are very real and they have performance characteristics that are altogether incompatible with terrestrial aircraft. So direct answer to the question is I don't think economics has much to do with it at all.
I would agree with Peter. I don't think that that's the reason that the secrets have been kept. I do not think disclosure will happen. I think it may be there will be incremental drips and people like me will get a hold of stuff and leak it out, but there's not going to come a day when somebody steps forward from the White House and says the aliens are here and sorry, we've been keeping this from you all that time. And I think the reasons are less about economics and more about national security because the technology that's been demonstrated, the kind of examples that we've seen in the media the last couple of months, the tic-tac engagement with the USS Nimitz. I don't know if any of you saw the story we did last night, but part of the footnote of the report was in 2015, there were 15 of those incidents involving the U.S. military off the East Coast. And the admirals in charge of a couple of those carrier groups out there were asking for help. The technology, as demonstrated in these incidents and as documented in official reports, is far beyond anything we have. If it's not ours, and we got to worry about the Russians or the Chinese getting it, and I think that would be a reason enough why they're not going to release all the goodies.
I just want to quickly disagree with Peter that passive radar will extinguish the need for festivals like this because we have so much fun. You guys have the best festival. We're so lucky to be here, and the organizers are amazing, and it really has been such a pleasure, and I feel very honored to be sitting up here with a great filmmaker and two incredible women who I just met. This has been such a cool experience. So as a participant, I want to thank you because we wouldn't be here if anybody didn't want to hear what we had to say or watch our films or hear our stories. So thank you very much. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, let's see if this is a little lighter. Do
Hang
you
on,
bel-
Tim. Oh, wait, wow.
Oh, go ahead.
Wow, I was there and that was gone. I do have along the way through this film, I've run into a lot of people, and I've not shared this with anybody really. But I got an opportunity to speak with a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, our Air Force, and asked him that question. He was aware of the program, whatever program that's being run. And I asked him about disclosure or release, and he said, you do realize that, our job is to protect from enemies, foreign and domestic. And, I said, yeah, of course. And he said, the primary concern still has been and still is panic. And which I guess it's a good point. And we spoke for about an hour, and he brought it up over and over and over about how the reason it's being kept back is for fear of our civilization or our society not essentially falling apart. Anyway, it left a big impression on me because I do respect this man, and he didn't have to tell me this. And so anyway, that's my contribution to that.
Okay, thanks. People would like to hear your thoughts, meaning the panel's thoughts, on To the Stars Academy. And one person in particular wrote, what is your take on the missteps so far with the Academy? The balloon photo, for example.
Guess that one's mine, huh? I think that DeLong and the group that he's with have their hearts in the right place, that they want to get to the bottom of this stuff. They wanted to build something. They might have chosen the wrong mechanism for it. The balloon thing was just an error. I mean, it's just a sloppy mistake. But they don't have a PR department. They're all kind of, that was thrown together. Lou Elizondo, 2 days before that event, he was resigning from the Pentagon, and then he finds himself on a stage in Seattle with DeLong and other distinguished folks and giving a speech about a secret program, and it was all kind of slammed together. They chose a mechanism of the Public Benefit Corporation that I don't think they really did a great job of realizing the kind of handcuffs it put on them. We had an agreement. Tom was going to do a radio interview with us right after they made the big announcement as a part of a launch, and then he was going to do other media interviews. You haven't seen that. You saw him do a podcast with Joe Rogan that was a disaster, but he didn't do any radio stuff. He didn't do TV stuff after they launched it, and it kind of fell flat. I think there's so much negativity in the UFO field, no matter what you put out. No matter what you put out, it just, people want to pounce on it and beat it down, and unless it's their story or their big expose, you crap on it. And Tom has taken a lot from the UFO crowd, his motives and his methods and his ultimate, who's the puppet master and why is he working with the secret cabal and all this stuff. It's way over the top. I think, as I said, their heart is in the right place. I think they've made some errors along the way. They're not evil intent, is my sense of it. I think they still have a possibility of doing some good work and moving this forward because of the people that they have there. Hal Puthoff is a brilliant man. He might win the Nobel Prize for Physics one of these days. Steve Justice from Skunk Works is a brilliant engineer. Jim Semivan, who worked with the CIA and has been just a steadfast guy in the intelligence community who had his own experience, is committed to figuring out what this stuff does. And, you know, and then Lou Elizondo, who also has been beaten to a pulp for what evil stuff he's up to. These guys are putting themselves out on the line. Tom DeLonge was already a multimillionaire. He didn't need to do this. He rolled his intellectual properties, movies and music and stuff all into the mix. So, you know, say what you want. He's not making a bunch of money off of this. They're not able to spend the money that they've raised so far. So they're kind of boxed in. I'm hoping that they get it going again, but I have not seen ulterior motives on their part, and I've worked with all those guys at one level or another. I do not work for them, by the way, which also comes up a lot. I don't work for them, and I don't work for Bob Bigelow, but I do know those folks, and I work to develop relationships with them because I want to get news stories. I want to find out what's going on, and those are the people that are involved with it. So, you know, it's tempting to dump on stuff that you're not sure about and to join the crowd on Twitter and to beat people up because of the conspiracy theories that have been endemic in this topic as long as I've been involved with it. But, you know, pause. Just pause once in a while.
I just want to clarify something about the Tic Tac case. And also, by the way, last night, George dropped a 13-page document that had not been seen by the public detailing the Tic Tac UFO case, which is one of the first pieces of like bona fide UFO footage put out by the United States government and gifted to the public, even though the public seems to try to shred it and shit on it. I say thank you, and I'm going to look into it a little bit more. That case, it was not a bird. It wasn't Wonder Woman. It was an unidentified flying object. Commander David Fravor personally engaged it directly. I just want to really clarify that. No matter how much you try to like pick this video apart, well, you haven't talked to the person that was flying the plane. I'm sure you haven't. That's the kind of thing we all need to do. It's easy to pick something apart frame by frame on a computer screen. You know, we need to become active participants in what we're interested in, not passive observers. And look, all of you already are. You're sitting here like engaging this subject, so I'm not really talking to you. But anyway, the point is, it's a very interesting case. And last night, 13-page document. George could have milked that for like weeks or months or even years, but you know, he put it out so that everybody could look at it and try to understand. It's crazy what people are writing. You know, it's crazy the way that people treat information people are trying to give you. So I guess my suggestion here in this kind of rant is to, you know, we should be grateful for when something comes out, and instead of like immediately being like crapping on it, try to absorb it. Try to find out more about it. The Tic Tac case was a real case. I was talking to Commander David Fravor long before it became public or popular. And I think we should, you know, think about that. We should really pay attention to the things that are coming out now and try to give them a little bit of weight, you know, and attention.
All right, thank you. So this is a good follow-up to that one. I'm going to read it as it's written, but maybe take a more general take on the question. Is there a place online that skeptics can look to find credible information? Or what are the best sources?
Well, I'll try to handle that one. All they have to do is go to our website. Whether they be skeptics or believers, it doesn't matter. What I do is sort of an even-handed presentation of data. I collect it, I screen it to the greatest degree possible and post it to our website for anybody who would like to use it. Anybody in this crowd, skeptics or any other person. If I'm uncertain about a case, I qualify it. I state what I think is the case, state what reservations I have about the case, but that's a good start. And MUFON is probably better still. There are many other very, very credible and hardworking UFO organizations in this country and around the world. And I would recommend a skeptic start going to them. The one thing I observe is the people who are the most skeptical are the ones who are least likely to have looked at reliable data. There's an inverse relationship there for sure.
Skepticism is good. Skepticism is excellent in a field that's as weird as this. It's good to be skeptical and ask questions. Skeptical in the sense of somebody from Missouri, show me, you know, as opposed to skepticism that becomes debunking. And folks say, I'm not going to believe that because I don't like the person who issued it, so I'm going to find a reason to dump on it, which is sort of what happens. That's what the UFO debunkers have always done. It's what a lot of UFO believers do now. You know, that they don't like where it came from, they'll find a reason to reject it.
Just a real quick direct answer. I'd say go to Reddit. They're crazy. You get into any kind of forum and try to find people that are believers, non-believers, but that's an open democratic forum. You'll always find everything in there. Also, above top secret, I think the climate is pretty sober-minded. So look, that question just means that you got to look harder. That's it. No one has the answer, but those are some ideas.
Okay, sorry. I guess there's a need for it. I think there's a need for a, guide to understanding the UFO phenomena, because when you first approach it, I just remember when I was looking for information, I came across all kinds of wacky stuff that really made me want to go, I'm done for tonight. And it would be nice to have some kind of guidance out there of what is legitimate work. People can get turned onto these different roads that have nothing to do with reality, or that we know. So I think it's really important, from my experience and people I've told to go, oh, you should check this phenomena out, and they've come back and said, well, what's really real? It'd be nice to have something out there that points to, MUFON or Peter Davenport's page, or different people that are actually doing really good work, that have ethics and are really trying to help. That's my sense.
Okay, thanks. This is back to Peter, I think would be the best one to try and answer this. My father-in-law was a guard at the Washington State Prison in Walla Walla during the 60s and early 70s. He witnessed a UFO that came close to the prison walls. Have you heard of this incident?
I'm not sure. It doesn't ring a bell with me, but people ask me that question all the time. I have almost 126,000 reports in my database. I can't call each and every one of them.
Peter.
I apologize profusely. I vaguely recall that I do have sighting reports from inside the walls of prisons, but whether it's that prison in that case, I can't say.
Okay, thanks. This is for anyone who wants to respond to it. How is consciousness linked to UFOs? Okay.
I thought you said it was going to be fun and light. Someone else take it? Randall?
I can mention something, but you guys should say something.
Okay, we will. You go first.
Well, I feel like that I've studied a lot of other reports besides this case, and I feel like, all this is always reported, telepathy, mind-to-mind communication, and I think about us, and we used to write letters to each other and dial each other on phones with rotary dials, like Salma said the other night, and we're moving into this fast communication over the internet and like instant communications, and I kind of wonder that we're leading into this, and maybe this other species have this process as well, where we get to a point and we just we don't need any of this. We're using some other form of communication that's innate in us, that may be, and that is consciousness, and maybe that is the ultimate evolution for us, or maybe who knows, but I think that is a place where, from all the reports I've talked to, they seem to own consciousness, and that's how they communicate.
Man, No pressure. Wow. So yesterday when I gave my presentation, I was talking about just the pace of life in 1994 versus now. And thanks, Randall, for mentioning a few of those things, because even the pace of life now in Zimbabwe is different to the pace of life here, right? And I think that for those of us who have straddled both of those experiences, and in recognizing what human interaction has changed, what it's like for us and how it's changed over time, is really, really important. I think, for me personally, this experience always, what it did from the get-go was it taught me to slow down, though. You know, just to take a breath. In fact, that's how I calmed myself down a lot of times. Even if it was by myself, actually. I've never told anybody that. I would, you know, take a breath, calm down, start again. I didn't know what consciousness was at 11. I don't think I knew how to spell it, probably not. But I think I'm still learning and recognizing what that is even now. So I hope that's somewhat of a answered question. Anything?
Thank you. Yes, no?
I want to hear what George has to say.
I've talked too much. No, not really. Well, I mean, the consciousness is the whole enchilada. You know, it's the whole ball of wax. We don't know what it is exactly. We can't quantify it. We don't know where it comes from. Is it related to the brain or the heart or something else? Is it all linked together? Is it the force? But it seems to be what binds together, at least like at the ranch. It sort of seems to be a commonality of all these different phenomena. It's just different manifestations of consciousness in some way that takes different forms at different times and appears to us in different ways. And I don't think. I get in these discussions with people whose brains are a lot bigger than I am. I don't know that anybody knows what it is. Maybe the Dalai Lama or somebody like that really has a handle on it, but scientists, really smart people, are struggling with it. And it was part of what the guys at the ranch, Nids and Bass, were trying to figure out, the role of consciousness as a common link for all that different phenomena. But as I said earlier today, I don't think anybody has really nailed it down.
I'll take a swing at that briefly. I'm a member of a group of professionals in the Seattle area that is hosted by Dr. Vernon Neppy, MD, PhD. He and his co-author, Dr. Ed Close from Missouri, a mathematician, have addressed that issue and written a very extensive paper on it. They were candidates for the Dinsdale Award this year as a result of that paper. But I mention all of this because one of the things they posit is that consciousness could be a dimension. They argue and they show mathematically, to their satisfaction anyway, I'm not qualified really to judge the paper, they have shown mathematically that consciousness can be a dimension. And the one thing I would add to it as a layman on this issue is physicists agree that there is conservation of matter. They agree that there is conservation of energy. The question I would pose as a follow-on to that, could there be conservation of consciousness? Could there be conservation of soul, for example? I have no answers for those questions, but I think they are legitimate questions to be asking in the context of the question posed.
Just real quick, I want to say we do apply meaning to everything. If we're like aware individuals who are curious about life, we do. We apply meaning to everything. But I certainly hope consciousness has something to do with the UFO experience, because otherwise my friends are absolutely crazy and have gone crazy because of what I've done to them. But I introduced them to somebody who thought they could bring these things in, you know, Harvard-educated graduate, a philosophy graduate, smart individuals, I respect them. They're either cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, or there is a connection between consciousness and these objects that we call UFOs and we think sometimes are hard physical craft.
Okay, thanks. Now I'd like to read a comment, not a question. And it says, I would like Salma and Lisil to know what superstars they are.
Thank you. That's so nice.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, this is for anyone who wants to take it. Do you see or do you feel, or is there evidence that DNA or alien DNA markers are becoming more common in the human population?
I'll field that for a second. I don't know, but if that is happening, we should all be very aware of that.
That's it?
We're unaware of that.
And I am unaware of that, but that would really concern me if that was the case.
It seems provable if it was true.
Okay. On to the next question. Did Bob Lazar get hired at Area 51, Section 4, because of what happened at Dulce? Can you talk a little bit about Dulce? Because I'd really like to know if we did lose many scientists then.
Well, we don't know. There is a story that Bob was told when he was hired that the reason there was an opening, there had been some sort of a firefight and a bunch of people got killed and it involved some other beings. He doesn't ascribe any credibility to it. He read told us that he read a bunch of briefing documents that he had to go through in a big hurry, and it was filled with a lot of really wild stuff. And he doesn't know for sure if it was some kind of a test to see if he would be gullible enough to buy it or whether it was real. All he knows is that that was the story he was told. I don't think he ever saw any proof of it.
Okay, on to the next one. Anyone who wants to respond to this? Do you believe that interdimensional or extraterrestrial beings are currently interacting with people on our planet or our planet in general?
Difficult question to answer, but one case comes to mind with regard to the specific question of whether there's interaction. It brings to mind the case of Todd Sees, who apparently lost his life, we believe, based on the evidence available to us, in a flying saucer on the 4th of August, 2002, over Northumberland County, Pennsylvania. If we can cite just one example of interaction, I think that will suffice to answer the question, but that was a very tragic and very dramatic case, and the evidence appears to be, in my opinion, adequate for us to ask a serious question of whether there was some kind of adverse interaction between the occupants, presumed occupants of that craft, and Todd Sees. If any of you is not familiar with the case, you can find a 6 or 8 or 10-page synopsis of what happened that Sunday morning on our website, ufocenter.com.
All right, thank you. Here's an interesting one. Do you believe, excuse me, do you believe that there are reptilian humanoids that walk among us in our daily lives? More specifically, what is your opinion that Senator Ted Cruz is a reptilian alien? Hold on.
I was going to say, no, I don't believe it until you said Ted Cruz.
All right, let me finish here. That Ted Cruz is a reptilian alien wearing a suit made of human skin.
Best question of the night.
Whoever wrote that question, I want to know if you think Ted Cruz is
Yeah.
a reptilian wearing human skin, because
Yeah,
then we
seriously.
got to talk.
All right. This is really the end of the session, but I wonder if there's anything that has not come up yet that you want to share.
The only thing I would add is the only way we can hold conferences like these and have such excellent speakers, the likes of which we've had this weekend, is if all of you and all of the rest of our occupants of this planet, if they've had an experience, they write it down and report it. We can't do anything more than what people tell us about. And I would only close by, on speaking for my own part, say that if you've ever had a UFO sighting or some kind of unusual experience that, in your opinion, could be somehow related to the UFO phenomenon, write it down and be sure to get it to MUFON, Oregon, MUFON, Washington, or wherever you live, and I would hope you would report it to the National UFO Reporting Center as well. Without that information, we can't do anything.
My final comment of the night would be to sort of echo something that Jeremy had said earlier. Thank you so much for having us here. McMinnville rocks. I love this conference, and I'm so happy that you invited me back, and that I got to be with such a great panel as this. The town it's so much fun. There's a spirit here about this event and in the larger town, not just here in this hall, of open inquiry. You know, we kind of chuckled about the lizard people question. You're supposed to ask questions like that. If you can't ask it in a place like this, where are you going to ask it? There's no such thing as a bad question. So we're here, and yeah. We are here in a sense of open inquiry and discussion and give and take. So there's no bad questions. And the spirit of this town and this event, man, I'm just so glad to be here, and I hope someday I get to come back.
Yeah, no bad questions. There are sometimes terrible answers, and I feel like I've given some of those to you tonight. But there's just one thing, that I like to say, which is that just having us here, the only thing that I can show you movies. It's cool if you watch my movies. George can tell you about Skinwalker Ranch. It's cool if you hear about it. Everybody has their experiences, and it's so cool of you to be participatory in it. But take that and flip it around. I make the joke I want to weaponize your curiosity. The reason for me being here is because I'm hoping that somebody will be inspired, like I was inspired, to go actively pursue something to move the ball forward, because we need more information. We need different perspectives. It's been a real pleasure to hear the little bits that I have from everybody's experiences that are here, but that's what motivates me, is when I get to experience a different perspective. So I just encourage you. It's really fun to come to these events. I like going to them, but turn it around. Contribute something, because we need all the help we can get. We have these incredible experiential things. We have film, we have reporting centers, but we need you. So that's it.
I never in a million years thought that I would ever be speaking about this, about our incident. Definitely not on this grand of a scale, although I guess we already did that technically when we were interviewed, but had no knowledge of how many people were watching and listening. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and for creating a space in which we, certainly I, could feel a little less inhibited to share my story. I will say this: yesterday, somebody asked me how I would deal with like naysayers, and I did this. I really did. I apologize. I was thinking, not sorry, but also I was thinking of a better answer. The diplomat in me was like, Salma, come up with something. And I was thinking about what my role is in terms of my experience and what I can contribute to this conversation overall. And it is that my job is not to convince somebody that I'm telling the truth. I know I am. My job is merely to live in my truth and to be accepting of it, and the rest will come. And so by being in a space like this, and thank you to everybody, Tim especially, for allowing me the opportunity to be here and to continue to unravel questions that I have about my incidents and circumstance and how I apply it to my life and why I've made the choices that I make. This has it's been incredibly helpful and incredibly humbling. So thank you all.
I'm not a person with many words, but I'm glad that I've come and I've now told my story. And I'd just like to thank Tim and Randall for giving me this opportunity. Maybe I can get some closure now. So I'd just like to say thank you.
Yeah, I really want to thank Salma and Lisil for coming out here. Yeah, it's meant a lot. And one thing I know about the Ariel School incident and the kids involved, all the people involved, is they're really solid people. They're really good people, and I've had nothing but pleasure to get to know them and hear their stories and the rest of their lives. And I guess the only thing I want to say is that if you know somebody or if you're one of those people out there that have had an experience and you've kept it secret, find somebody that's a friend or family that'll listen to you, that you can share it with. It's super important. And maybe later down the line, find somebody reputable that is sane to help you, that's investigating this phenomena in order to help you if you need it, because it can be a little mind-blowing and change your life. But I just want to put that out there because we're all in this together, and I really appreciate what Peter said a lot and everybody else about the information is important, and for all of us, we're all in this together, and it's really important. Thank you so much for everything, Tim, and everybody that's come here. I've met some wonderful people, and I'll never forget your faces. And I'm just going to end. Okay.
Could I make a comment, Tim? Do we have a little time left?
Yes, go ahead.
Speaking as the only person on the stage here who's not a scheduled speaker this year, I would like to compliment all of the speakers on the excellent, excellent presentations they gave to all of us, the excellent jobs. All the slides, all the words that they said are the result of thousands of hours of preparation, expenditure of time and treasury, and I think we ought to give them a round of applause for a job superbly well done.
Thanks to all of you, and thanks to the audience for coming. We'll see you next year for the 20th annual. Thanks.